Chapter 17 Cinnaba. Finally, the towers of Castle Cinnaba were visible on the horizon, and I felt my heart lighten. I urged Fyodor on faster, and he broke into a steady canter, as if sensing my eagerness. Although I had been to Admata, the capital of Cinnaba, several times before, it still took my breath away. The walls were painted with intricate designs, patterns mimicking the marks of Cinnaba royalty. They swirled across the whitewashed walls in hues of stunning blues and fiery reds. Perhaps they were hoping that the marks which granted good health and longevity would do the same to their city. I trotted Fyodor through the gates and into the town square. Noticing me, some of the townspeople bowed. Feeling embarrassed, I slid off Fyodor's back and stood amongst them. Please, I'm no more worthy of respect than anyone else here, I said. Do not pay any heed to my status. I heard their murmurs of thanks and went on my way, leading my hoofed companion along beside me. I rubbed my aching leg, which was throbbing after the long journey. I was pleased to see that I was beginning to know my way around the city, and had no trouble finding the palace stables. I refused a helpful groom's offer to untack Fyodor and did it myself. After finding my horse a roomy stall, I brushed myself off and entered the castle, feeling self-conscious. The castle was as beautiful as the city walls. While smaller than Castle Varrock, it had a much more intricate design. Spiral patterns caressed the walls, which were the same whitewashed color as the outside of the city. Inside, several servants quietly bowed and greeted me. I tried to be courteous, but my mind was elsewhere.
"Ah, Prince Casimir,"
said one of the female servants, an attendant of Princess Vanessa. Her face was lined, but her eyes were soft and gentle.
"The princess is in the castle gardens, if you're looking for her."
"Thank you, Esther," I replied, remembering the kindly woman's name. Moving anxiously, I slipped into the garden. And then I saw her. She was lost in a book, reading on the stone bench. Her hair, the same shade of sable as all the citizens of Cinnaba, gleamed in the sunlight. It hung in rich curls past her shoulders, partially blocking the marks that traced patterns on her neck and arms. She wore a plain dress, not a fanciful or elaborate one like her older sisters insisted on wearing. She heard my approach and looked up, her blue eyes bright. She breathed my name and my heart seemed to tremble in my chest. She stood only a few feet away and smiled shyly.
"I've missed you, Casimir,"
she said, a blush coloring her cheeks. I stepped closer and lifted her hand to my lips. "And I've missed you as well, Vanessa." Suddenly, all formality was tossed aside, and she threw her arms around my neck. I hugged her back tightly, glad that her father, King Wayland, was busy focusing on his kingdom and his other children, rather than his youngest daughter.
"How was your trip? Is Fyodor all right?"
she asked, pulling away from me. She began to walk along the slowly manicured path. It was fine, and Fyodor is no doubt happily devouring a bale of hay back at the stables, I answered with a smile. I followed after her, looking at the flowers, thinking of how they reminded me of Vanessa, as well as Calla. Vanessa laughed, but there was something odd, distracted about the sound. I placed my hand on her shoulder, and she stopped. "What's wrong?" I asked her, concerned. She said nothing, and for a moment the only sound I could hear was the hum of bees and the songs of birds. Then Vanessa turned toward me and wrapped her arms around my waist. My arms encircled her tightly, and her smell, a divine fragrance of flowers and citrus, surrounded me. I was silent as I waited for her to speak, wondering what had upset her so much.
Casimir, remember what I told you before? That my mother was ill.
Her voice trembled as she spoke, when she usually had such a refined and confident tone. I nodded, feeling my heart drop. Cinnaba royalty was not supposed to get ill, especially one with as pure a bloodline as her mother. Cinnaba marks were supposed to grant long life and immunity to all illness. It was rare that a noble of Cinnaba would die before the age of 80. And Vanessa's mother, Queen Lilith, was only in her 50s. "Is she any better?" I asked. Vanessa shook her head, burying her face in my chest.
There must be something wrong with my family. Father has become ill too, with the same illness that has affected my mother, as well as ordinary citizens. He and mother are just getting sicker and sicker. Something must be wrong with their marks.
She sobbed, and I held her more tightly. For any marked royalty, there was nothing more shameful than having faulty marks. That was one of the reasons that Kala had been locked away for so long. "Vanessa, why don't you let me try to help?" I suggested. "My marks have healing properties. While they may not be as powerful as the healing marks of Kokaba, they might help your parents."
Are you sure?
She asked, looking up from me with hope in her crystal eyes.
Don't feel like you have to.
"It's not that," I answered. "I truly would like to see them better, and your worrying is also something I'd like to cure."
Then, would you mind helping them now?
She asked, taking my hands in her own.
I don't want to rush you, but the sooner they are well again, the sooner things in the castle will go back to normal. Everyone's been a nervous wreck lately. I think Christopher is about ready to snatch the crown off Father's head.
I laughed, thinking about Christopher, her oldest brother. He was first in line for the throne, and was always eager for some indication that he would soon be the successor. "Of course I'll help now, unless your parents would object."
"No, I'm sure it'll be fine. Let's go,"
she said, tugging me along after her. She was practically skipping as she led me up one of the 2 towers of Castle Cinnaba. The walls were not covered in elegant patterns, but draped with ornate tapestries depicting famous kings and battles. After far too many stairs, we reached the king and queen's room. Vanessa knocked at the door, announcing that she had brought me to help. At her parents' approval, she let me in. Vanessa's mother, a short, slender woman with flowing brown hair, was looking out the window over the town, while her father, whose receding hairline was streaked with gray, was laying in bed, his face pale. Both were garbed with fine clothing, although I knew that it was nothing compared to their usual splendor.
"Mother, Father, this is Prince Casimir of Araki. I know you've been formally introduced before," she continued. "Casimir might be able to help you with your illness. Is that all right?"
Queen Lilith turned toward me with a smile. I smiled when I saw that Vanessa had the same crystal eyes as her mother.
"That is very kind of you, Prince Casimir," she said. "Is there anything you would desire in return? There is nothing that our marks can bestow upon you, but we have material goods at our supply.
I shook my head. Thank you for your generosity, but I don't require anything. Are you ready? She nodded, and I cautiously placed my hand on her brow, closing my eyes. I could feel the illness inside her, running through her veins like thousands of tiny marbles. I focused and felt the marks on my chest grow hot as I tried to heal the illness. I focused until I could no longer sense the illness inside her, then opened my eyes with a smile.
Could you cure her?
Vanessa asked, her hand on my arm. I nodded, ignoring the sudden dizziness. Your Majesty, I said, turning toward the king, who had stood up. He kept a stubborn silence for a moment, and I knew he didn't want to be healed by a young prince like myself. Fine, he grumbled, and stepped closer to me. His illness was easily cured, although further use of my marks did nothing to help my unsteadiness.
Casimir, are you all right?
Asked Vanessa, looking at me with concern. I nodded but staggered forward. To my embarrassment, the queen steadied me with a worried smile.
You may rest here in our castle, Prince Casimir,
she said, supporting me on one side while Vanessa put my arm around her shoulder to steady me.
Vanessa, will you help him to our spare room? Of course, mother,
she said, and helped me from the room. I heard King Wayland and Queen Lilith's honest words of thanks behind me, and I smiled, despite the pounding behind my skull.
Are you sure you're all right, Kaz?
Vanessa asked again as she helped me into one of the many spare rooms in the castle. I nodded, running a hand through my scarlet hair. I just feel a bit faint is all, I said, and sat down on the edge of the bed. I looked up at Vanessa, whose sapphire eyes were filled with concern. Don't worry. A little sleep will make me feel better in no time. She smiled at me, trusting my words.
Thank you for helping my parents. I'm not sure how I can thank you enough. Have a pleasant sleep, and may Cinnabon watch over your dreams,
she said, and then left. Only partially aware of my surroundings, I pulled the thick blankets over myself, my heart beginning to pound, and I thought of Calla. I hoped that she was all right on her journey of hers. Would her marks really be removed? Would she be cured? Senseless dread clouded my thoughts. I drifted into sleep, hoping the worries would leave me. Be calm, child. No danger awaits you, came the voice, the one I hadn't heard for years. It's you, I replied, although I didn't know who you was.
Where's Calla? Is she all right? Is she in danger?
I looked through the dense fog, but my eyes found nothing. Peace. Your sister is fine. I will not allow any harm to befall her. Now, rest. I tried to ignore that calming voice, but I felt the dream begin to slip away. I fought against the voice's orders. There were more questions I wanted to ask. Who are you? I tried to say, but sunk into a deeper sleep, where no thoughts clouded my mind. Chapter 18. A Decision. When we entered Inokai, my heart began to pound. I was finally there. Finally, I had reached the country where I'd be freed. I couldn't help smiling as I looked around the city, watching the people as they went about their everyday business. For the first time, the town people didn't look up as Dante and I arrived, which immediately made me feel a bit more at ease. Still, the public setting kept me close to Dante's side, and I kept my hand on Casimir's dagger. "This is wonderful!" I exclaimed, looking about. "There are so many people! I've never seen a city this large. Is this the capital?" "No," he said simply, and began walking quickly through the town. I trotted along at his side, keeping quiet. He zeroed in on a large, well-kept building, which obviously was some sort of military building. My heart beat more and more quickly until it was slamming against my ribs, as if trying to break free from a cage. Dante opened the double doors to the building, which made an unearthly high-pitched scream, making me flinch in surprise. Claws dug into my palms, but only after a few seconds they changed back into normal fingers. Inside, guards and soldiers milled about, but Dante didn't pay any attention to them. Instead, he walked with more eagerness in his step than I had ever seen him before, following signs and weaving through hallways. His shoulders were tense, and his jaw set, and I knew something was pressing on his mind. "Where are we going?" I asked, hoping to distract him from whatever he was thinking about. "The General's office. Can't you read?" His voice was harsh and irritated, but I didn't reply. I laughed silently to myself at his words, although there wasn't any humor in them, only irony. After I was silent for a moment, Dante replied, still walking forward. "He'll direct you to the medical building from here. Your father told me to entrust you into his care," he said. Immediately I knew he was lying, and my heart pounded faster. I froze, trying to control my breathing. Hearing me stop, Dante turned toward me. His eyes were frigid as he reached for something. His dagger, no doubt. Moving slowly, I placed my hand on his arm, and I felt him flinch as I saw the revulsion in his eyes. Yet he didn't draw his dagger, but he kept his eyes wearing on my face. "Thank you for everything you've done. I don't know if I would have made it this far without your help. It was good of my father to send you with me. I'll always be grateful to him because of that." I felt my throat close up, and I pushed the panic back into my mind. Dante seemed to find something amusing, but after only a few seconds, he masked his expression. "Let's go," he said, although the hint of a smile that shaped his lips and colored his eyes meant nothing good for me. It still put me at ease. I felt a smile turn up the corners of my own lips, and I nodded to Dante, my heart returning to its normal rhythm. "I've been waiting for this for a long time," I said simply. Dante turned away and walked only a few more paces before knocking at an ornately carved door. The voice that invited him through sounded rough, yet strong and controlled. Curious of the owner to it, I followed Dante inside. The man inside was most likely the general. Immediately reminded me of Nikolai. There was a kindness in his eyes, and a bit of mercy that so few had. Yet when his gaze turned to me, all similarities to my friend from the castle vanished, just like the gentleness in the man's eyes. It was clear to me that he saw in front of him nothing more than a beast. This must be the girl that someone important sent here. Am I correct? Said the general to Dante. His eyes left mine, and he didn't glance again in my direction. You are? I leave her in your care then, General, said Dante, whose relief was obvious. Thank you. Your wages are to be accepted at Castle Varrock, added the general lightheartedly. Something about his mundane words, however, affected Dante, although his surprise was masked in a fraction of a second. Of course. Goodbye, General, said Dante, turning to leave. For a moment, I met his eyes, but he continued past me without stopping. Goodbye, Dante. I hope I can see you again after this is all over, I whispered, not sure if he could hear me. It didn't matter, though, because my words were a lie. Where I was going, he could not follow. He had no place in the place that I was surely heading for. The door slammed shut behind him. Despite feeling trapped, my heart remained slow, and my mind calm. I turned back to the general, who was looking at me, yet he didn't see me. It was as if he was seeing past me and admiring the carvings on his door. I'll escort you to the medical building now, so you can begin your treatment. Please, leave any weapons you have here, as they're not allowed in the medical building. He lied. I did as he said, and unbuckled the gleaming dagger that Casimir had given me, then placed it on his desk. As I did so, I realized that I was still wearing Dante's coat. I frowned. I had planned on returning it to him. I slowly unbuttoned it and set down the rest of my belongings, carefully tucking the coat inside my packs. Could you see to it that these things are given to the bodyguard who accompanied me? I asked. The general nodded, but looked unsure, as if he didn't know what was going on in my head. He got to his feet, standing well over a head taller than me. Come with me, he said, and led me out the door. As I followed him through the building, I could hear the guards trailing us, but I felt nothing other than almost serene calm. This will be your room, said the general, gently nudging me in front of him. The door was small, yet reinforced with steel bars. I smiled to myself. Although I knew what was lying ahead, I reached for the doorknob. But as I did so, the general's hand shot out and grabbed me by the wrist. In only seconds, the other guard had leapt forward. One guard assisted the general in binding my wrists tightly, while others yanked my head back and forced a gag into my mouth. I didn't struggle, nor did I feel any joints crack in preparation of that change. No, I didn't need to fight. Dante had betrayed me, but that didn't sting me at all. I should thank him, if anything, because he was granting me one of my greatest dreams. Death had always been something that I, while never longing for it, would always accept. The general opened the door and shoved me into the room, but the guards didn't follow. He shut the door behind him, and I heard the guards on the other side lock it tightly. I tried to get up, with my hands bound so tightly it was near impossible, though. The general grabbed me by the shoulder and hauled me to my feet. His eyes were like carved marble, and held no signs of weakness as he pulled the dagger from his belt and pressed it into my throat. I did not struggle, but met his eyes and tried to tell him that it was all okay. I thought of Kaz, and prayed that he wouldn't miss me, and that Vanessa would bring him happiness. I thought of father and mother. I thought of Dante. I prayed they all be safe. I felt the knife dig into my flesh, and hot blood trickle down my neck. The pain made me flinch, but as the general was about to draw it quickly across my throat, he froze, and a crack appeared in his marble eyes. "Why won't you fight?" he growled. "They told me you were a beast, so why don't you show yourself? Were they lying to me?" He pulled the gag from my mouth and dropped it onto the ground, as if he were giving me a chance to explain just what kind of monster I was. The hand at my throat and the steel at my flesh didn't tremble, although the pressure was no longer there. I looked down at the scarlet drops of my blood that trickled from my neck and dripped onto the ground. "They didn't lie," I said simply, and met his eyes. "You fool!" shouted that voice from the back of my head, the one that had haunted me in my dreams. I flinched in surprise, but the general, who couldn't hear the voice, had made up his mind. Whatever he saw in my face assured him that my words were true. He tangled his hand in my hair and pulled my head back. In his face, I knew that he was going to drag that knife across my throat, but I didn't move. "You can't die here," the voice shouted. I felt a ripple slam through my body. "No!" I shrieked as the change began to take me. "Don't make me!" I screamed as my body changed on its own. I felt as if my limbs were being torn apart. Never before had such agony occurred when I changed. I fought against it with every ounce of my strength in my body as the world seemed to slow around me. "Don't make me change!" I shouted again. "I won't let you die! Fight! Fight!" That voice shouted in return, and everything in my body seemed to tear as I fought against it. Yet I couldn't win. And I didn't win. And everything seemed to turn red as I tore through the bonds that held my wrist. Faster than the general's eyes could see, I had changed into a beast, just like he had seen in my eyes and in my words. I slammed into him and sent the dagger flying. I wanted to go for his throat, and I planted my front paws in his chest as he fell to the ground. My fangs were only inches from his throat when I saw that his eyes had turned gentle again. Confused, I stepped back, whining in my throat. Before I can change my mind and attack him again, I threw myself against the door. One slam was all it took, and the door burst open. I hit the ground with racing paws and tore through the building. Voices bombarded my sensitive hearing as the beast inside took over. I struggled to keep my mind clear as I raced through the building, running into guards and knocking them flying before they knew what hit them. A familiar scent hit my nose. Dante? The scent was definitely his. My claws dug into the floor as I raced through the scent. I dashed to the room where the scent had its origin. No, the scent wasn't Dante. It was the general's room, where my pack sat on the floor, Dante's coat carefully packed inside. The source of the familiar scent. I grabbed Cass's dagger, now mine, from the desk with my jaws and dropped it carefully into my packs. Then I snatched up my packs in my mouth, grabbed them securely, breathing hard. A guard blocked the door as I turned to escape, and I felt his dagger dig into my side. I howled in anger, and everything went darker. I dropped the bag, and with one snap of my jaws he fell to the ground, blood pouring from his throat. Heart pounding, I picked up the bags again, and I dashed, trusting instincts and paws to carry me as far away as possible, away from fragile humans. Suddenly my sensitive ears picked up a sound, a word that halted my sprint. I skidded to a stop, and though I heard guards chasing me, I didn't move. In another room, I could hear soldiers talking, and again they said that name that had sent a jolt through my mind. You mean Dante the mercenary? No wonder they're sending half the squad. That guy's a nightmare. He's not going to be an easy kill, but at least we'll have another one of those mercenaries out of the way. They were going to kill Dante. Had this been a trap for him as well? I wouldn't allow him to be harmed. Even if he had knowingly led me to his death, I couldn't just let him die. Charging forward once more, I burst through the door and into the town. Night had fallen, and the darkness hid my form as I raced through the night. I could hear the guards behind me, and the whinnying of horses told me that the cavalry was being sent after me too. Finding Dante was one thing that kept my mind together, instead of that beast side eclipsing my human side. I lifted my head and breathed in deeply as I ran, trying to find his scent. There were so many scents in the city, and every second wasted was one that tired me further, but I couldn't leave without him. Finally, his smell hit my nose, and I tracked him, dashing through the alleys, my paws being torn up by the garbage on the ground. I saw him then, prowling in the side streets in silence, blending into the shadows. He heard me approach, and I could tell by the way his muscles tensed. "Dante!" I shouted, thankful that he could understand my words even in this form. He turned, and moonlight glinted off his icy eyes. Something else glinted, and I tried to dodge, but the pain still tore through me as he hurled his dagger to my side, barely missing my heart. I growled in pain, and he pulled out his knife, pulling it back for another strike. "Stop!" I whispered, struggling to breathe. I dodged his strike, but I didn't retaliate. There are men coming after you. They mean to kill you. You have to run." He paused for a moment, and I knew that he was thinking hard. Suddenly, he sheathed his dagger and grabbed the packs from my jaws, sliding them onto his back. "Which way are they coming from?" he asked, looking about. "From behind me. They're coming quickly," I said. Dante turned and began to run. I dashed along behind him, claws scraping at the ground beneath my paws. Everything in me screamed to go faster, but I couldn't leave him. I heard the cavalry then, charging down the main street and for the gates. At this rate, they would reach them before us. Surely they would trap us here. I heard them draw closer and closer, and Dante was too slow, too slow, too slow. I lowered my head and charged forward, slamming into Dante and knocking him into the air, then down onto my back. As a reflex, he clutched at my shoulders, one hand gripping into my pelt while the other held onto the packs. "Don't fight me, just trust me. I'll help you," I said, trying to form a coherent sentence as my mind began to darken. "Please." I dashed forward and hurried onto the main road. I could see the gates in front of me and hear the cavalry right behind me, matching the rhythm of Dante's heart as well as my own. The sounds urged me faster and faster, and I sprinted through the gates. I heard the whistle of arrows behind me as the archers stationed on the wall attacked. One hit its mark and buried into the flesh on my back, causing me to snarl in pain, although I didn't slow down. Another immediately hit its mark, nearly hitting Dante, but instead tearing through the flesh on my shoulder. Suddenly, I was out of their range, and was still running, pain ripping through me. But that had no comparison to the desires to run, and to fight. I ran for what seemed like hours, although it was no longer than a few minutes. My sides were heaving, and I slowed, blood dripping from my mouth. Dante slid off my back, breathing hard, but not as exhausted as I was.
I can't run. You must escape. I'll fight,
I said, struggling to speak. He dropped the packs to the ground as I gasped for breath, panting hard. He looked at me with hatred and disgust, but he was alive. I smiled through wolf-like jaws, blood dripping from the ground.
I'll hold them off. Get far away from here,
I said. I pushed my nose through my pack and carefully grasped his coat between my jaws, then held it out to him. He took it slowly, his eyes meeting mine. As I looked into his ice-fire eyes, I saw no fear in them. I wondered what he saw in mine.
May Viragi smile upon you, and may its light mark your path. With its light your sword will not falter, nor will your shield ever fail,
I whispered. I bowed my head for a moment, then turned away from Dante. I heard him walk away, then break into a run, and relief flooded me. He would be safe. I just needed to hold back the cavalry. I would fight. I could see them now, racing forward, a wall of thundering hooves and goring spears. The weapons glittered with dangerous beauty, and felt a howl rip from my very heart and through my mouth.
Stay back! If you value your lives, turn away from my jaws. I will not hesitate to tear through flesh and bone,
I howled, a warning to the horses and riders alike. At the sound, I heard the whinnying of confused chargers, as some of them skidded to a halt, ignoring the angry spurring of their riders. Despite my warnings, the rest of the cavalry charged on. I could hear the snorting of the horses, and the thunder of their hooves seemed to make my bones rattle. I parted my jaws and snarled, hearing the sound echo through the plains.
Run, Dante,
I whispered, then leapt forward to meet them, relinquishing the last of my sanity to the enveloping darkness.